Somewhere on your phone, right now, there is an app that can find water for you. Point it in any direction, and it will tell you the nearest tap, the nearest fountain, the nearest store selling a bottle of it. You have never had to think about where water comes from. You just have to think about where the nearest door is. Now picture a landscape with none of that. No river, no lake, no puddle, not even mud. Sand, thorn bushes, heat that shimmers off the ground by 9 in the morning, and silence for 100 miles in every direction. And people living there. Not surviving one bad week. Living there, raising children there, growing old there, for thousands of years. That should not be possible. A human being can die of dehydration in a matter of days. So how do you build a life in a place that appears to have no water at all? The answer is not that these communities found some hidden oasis nobody else knew about. In parts of the Kalahari, in the deep interior of the Australian desert, in stretches of the world we would call unlivable, water was never sitting out in the open, waiting to be found. It was hidden, underground, inside plants, inside animals, inside memory itself. And learning to see it took one of the strangest, most patient forms of intelligence our species ever developed. Start with the body's side of the problem, because it is not forgiving. An adult loses water constantly, through breath, through skin, through the simple act of staying alive in heat. Push that body through a full day of walking under a desert sun, and the losses climb fast. There is no biological workaround. No adaptation lets a human quietly opt out of needing water. Evolution handed us a superb cooling system, efficient sweating that let our ancestors move long distances without overheating, and then left us with the bill for it. So, in a landscape with no visible water, the first tool humans needed was not a container. It was a map that existed nowhere but inside someone's head. People who have spent generations in the Kalahari learned to read the ground itself as a water source. Certain vines, growing low and easy to miss, lead down to swollen underground tubers, some the size of a fist, packed with moisture. Dig one up, grate it, squeeze it, and it releases enough liquid to matter. Knowing which vine at which time of year in which soil was not a lucky guess. It was information passed down so precisely that a person could walk into apparently empty scrubland and know exactly where to start digging. Then there is a plant that sounds almost too convenient to be real, a wild melon, growing low to the sand that is mostly water on the inside. In good years, fields of these melons appear after rain, and can carry a family through weeks without ever needing another source. Ethnographers working with Kalahari communities in the 20th century documented people relying on them so heavily that entire seasons were planned around where the melons would ripen. Not a backup plan, a primary water supply growing directly out of the sand. But plants alone were not the whole solution, because not every stretch of desert has them, and not every season is generous. So people found water in a second place. Almost nobody would think to look, underneath dry, cracked ground that has not seen rain in months. Beneath certain dry, sandy riverbeds, moisture can sit trapped a foot or two down, left over from rain that fell somewhere upstream long before. You cannot see it, you cannot smell it. The surface looks identical to ground that is bone dry all the way through. Finding it required a kind of pattern recognition built from years of watching, where plants stayed slightly greener, where animal tracks converged, where the sand felt different underfoot. And once that hidden layer of moisture was found, the extraction method was almost absurdly elegant. A hollow reed or a long stem pushed down into the sand until it reached the damp layer. A person would kneel, put their mouth to the top, and draw the moisture upward, sip by sip, straight out of ground that looked, to anyone else, completely dead. Some groups packed the base with dry grass to filter out sediment as the water rose. It is not a well. There is no shaft, no bucket, no visible hole. To an outsider walking past, there is nothing there at all. To someone who understood the land, it was a working faucet, disguised as sand. Here is where the story gets stranger. Water pulled up this slowly could not simply be drunk on the spot and forgotten. It had to be stored, carried, protected, sometimes for weeks. And the container used across parts of the Kalahari for this exact purpose was an ostrich egg. An emptied ostrich eggshell, sealed with a plug of grass or resin, is close to watertight, hard enough to survive being carried across rough ground, and large enough to hold roughly a litre. Filled shells were carried on long journeys and, more remarkably, buried at known points across the landscape, sometimes far from any camp, as a kind of hidden reserve for a future trip. Coming across a buried, filled ostrich egg in the middle of nowhere was not luck. It was withdrawing from an account someone had deliberately opened, possibly years earlier. Archaeological finds of decorated ostrich eggshell in this region stretch back tens of thousands of years, and while shell fragments cannot tell us exactly when this specific water storage practice began, the technology needed to do it, working the shell, sealing it, was clearly already in human hands for an extraordinarily long time. This is the part that tends to surprise people. It was not toughness that let humans live in the driest places on Earth. It was memory, organized into a system precise enough to function like infrastructure, just without a single brick or pipe. The same pattern shows up, independently, on the other side of the world. In the deep desert interior of Australia, Aboriginal communities maintained knowledge of water sources scattered across vast, punishing distances, encoded not in written maps but in song and story, passed from elder to child with enough precision that a route between waterholes hundreds of kilometers apart could be followed by someone who had never walked it before, simply by knowing the song. Two unrelated human populations on two different continents solved the same impossible problem the same fundamental way, by making water knowledge something a community carried forward together, not something each person had to rediscover alone. None of this made these deserts safe. People still went without. Bad years still killed people, especially the very young and the very old. Finding a hidden route or a buried egg was not a guarantee. It was an improved chance, built out of decades of collective trial, failure and teaching, generation after generation refusing to let hard-won knowledge die with the person who learned it. What changed everything, eventually, was not that humans became stronger. It was that they became better at not forgetting. Look at your phone again. That water-finding app is not really a break from the past. It is the very same behavior, translated into a different material. Someone, somewhere, still had to learn where the water was and build a system to remember it for the next person. We just moved the memory outside our own skulls, into satellites and databases, so thoroughly that we forgot we were ever the ones doing the remembering in the first place. Tomorrow, when you fill a glass without a second thought, you are standing at the end of the same unbroken chain that once ran through a reed pushed into dry sand, and an ostrich egg buried for a stranger it would never meet. We didn't outgrow that kind of knowledge. We just stopped noticing we still needed it.